Technically True by Tanay Pant. Hey everyone, welcome to this special episode of Technically True. I'm your host Tanay Pant, wishing you all a very happy new year. In this episode, we will talk about taking care of mental health, reducing stress and anxiety, avoiding burnouts, and practicing mindfulness. Today I'm joined by Rosie Evans.
Hi.
Rosie is a positive psychology and well-being consultant with a passion for mindfulness. She helps individuals and organizations flourish through her coaching sessions, workshops, and research. Next time you see her, ask her to pronounce that famous Welsh train station. In case you do not know what I'm talking about, I would recommend you to look it up. But Rosie, would you mind pronouncing it for us now?
No problem at all. So it has 58 letters in, and it's pronounced like Llanfairth Pwllgwyngyll go Gereth Gwyndrawaith Haddesilio Gogogoth.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
It's quite extraordinary, yeah. Sing it completely properly because I have a very English accent, not a Welsh accent, but I definitely recommend looking it up.
A very warm welcome, Rosie. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name's Rosie Evans. I'm British and I grew up in London. I've lived in Berlin now for about 4 years, and I moved here with my husband and my dog called Cat. And as Tane said, I'm a positive psychology and well-being consultant. And what that basically means is I help organizations and individuals apply insights from the science of well-being, which is positive psychology, and help them to sustainably integrate it within their own lives or within their organizational culture. I actually began my academic life as a psychologist. I studied at Bangor University, which is in Wales, very close to the train station I mentioned. And that's where I really first found out about mindfulness. I was able to participate in an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, which for myself at that time, third year bachelor's student, highly stressed, and was incredibly helpful and powerful. And since then, my focus has been around mindfulness, but also wanting to better understand mental health in general. And that's why I later on went to complete a master's degree in mental health studies at King's College London to understand the different factors that contribute to the development of different mental health disorders. But ultimately, my interest was actually less clinical and much more educational and preventative. And so that's why in more recent years, so within the last 2 years specifically, my entire focus has been on working within schools and organizations to help them thrive, help them to flourish. And that's been my biggest interest so far, and I would like to keep pursuing this. And one of the best projects coming up is this positive education conference in Germany that's happening next year in October 2020. And I'm organizing that with Dr. El Kapul, the Franconian International School, and the International Positive Education Association. And this for me is very exciting because it's bringing so many different perspectives, students, teachers, researchers, experts in positive psychology together to really work out how to help students and teachers thrive and really integrate positive education into the curriculum.
Wow, thanks for sharing that with us. All right, keeping in line with our tradition, let's do a rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, so here we go. Which 3 words would you use to describe yourself?
Positive, friendly, and warm.
Cool. Your dearest procrastination technique?
To write a to-do list for procrastination. So I preempt what I will be most likely to procrastinate. And I make a to-do list so when I need to, or when I have the urge to, or have time to procrastinate, I can tick some of those off the list.
That sounds good. A speaker who you learned the most from?
My supervisor in my bachelor's degree, Dr. Tracy Lloyd.
A book that you would recommend?
Oh, there's so many. The first one that comes to mind is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Awesome. This was fun. And not so long ago, Rosie and I were colleagues at ResearchGate, A few weeks
Mm-hmm.
back, we talked about different topics related to mental health and how it plays an important role in life. After the discussion, I knew we had to use this theme as a special edition for the New Year's. So, Rosie, how did you first get involved in this realm of public speaking and mental health?
So I first got involved whilst I was at university. I had to participate in a course for 3 years known as Psychology Oral Presentation Practice, or POPS for short.
Mhm.
So for 3 years, we had weekly public speaking training,
Mhm.
particularly to support us with the delivery of scientific presentations. Because as a researcher, it's very important to disseminate your work and to go to conferences and to speak publicly, either through a poster presentation or oral presentation,
Mhm.
and spread those insights to that community. And so that was the first time, yeah.
And what are you currently working on?
So I have quite a few projects, and I mentioned the conference that I'm helping to organize for next year, the Positive Education Conference in Germany. So that's one major project I'm really looking forward to.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm focusing on lots of individual projects with organizations to help them to really bring mindfulness and some positive psychology insights into their daily work.
Well, having worked in this field for a while now, what are some of the most common mental health issues that you have come across?
So in my line of work, it's typically chronic stress
Mhm.
and low self-esteem,
Mhm.
something called imposter syndrome. So this sense that
Mm.
perhaps you're not where you should be, or perhaps that you're a fraud in your line
Mhm.
of work. Rumination, so the constant overthinking of past events, and burnout.
That's awesome that you mentioned burnout, because one of the things that you hear quite often these days is burnouts. And recently, WHO characterized burnouts as an occupational phenomenon. And
Mm-hmm.
when you hear stories of burnouts, one of the things that often comes to your mind is, how can I prevent that from happening to me? So, could you tell us what causes burnouts, what burnouts are, and why do they happen?
Absolutely. And World Health Organization have only recently um, defined burnout as this occupational phenomenon, which quite simply means that it's not a medical condition, but what it is a disorder or an experience that can be caused by work, and more specifically, chronic workplace stress that's not effectively managed. And
Mhm.
what happens is that people become exhausted. They
Mhm.
can see an increase in negativity or cynicism about
Mhm.
their profession, and also impaired performance.
And any advice on how we can effectively avoid burnouts?
So, from my perspective, it really begins with taking a closer look inwards and better understanding yourself. So, what does stress mean to you? How do
Mhm.
you know that you are stressed? And what are the warning signs? So, perhaps to give you an idea of how to get the ball rolling, stress, as defined by Richard Lazarus, is a condition or a
Mhm.
feeling that's experienced when a person perceives that demands exceed their personal and social resources, and that the individual is able to use or mobilize. So to take a closer look at your daily life, how are you spending your
Mhm.
time, and how often do you have this sensation that, or feeling that the demands of your work, or even demands from personal life as well, exceeds your resources? So that's a wonderful starting point. And ways that you can do this is through a more introspective technique such as mindfulness, to see what comes up for you naturally, but also if you feel that this is something that resonates with you, then to perhaps go and talk to a coach, or to perhaps speak with a um, therapist about it as well, to gain some perspective,
Mhm.
but also to journal as well, to um, keep a log, to keep a track of what's happening in your day-to-day life that is causing you stress, and this sensation of not being able to have the resources to manage it.
Mhm.
Because what's really important when it comes to stress, and then also to burnout, which is the chronic
Mhm.
stress, is that
Yeah.
people are often unaware that they are stressed.
Mhm.
And from my perspective, again, another really important technique, or not technique really, just an approach, is for people to keep an eye and to help those around them. So to support your colleagues, to support your friends, to perhaps shine a light on their stress if you have this feeling or the knowledge that they're not coping with it. So that's why it's very important for me to help teams to build those effective communication strategies and to create those supportive cultures.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we take a look at the last decade, we see a rise in mental health issues, especially in the context of tech startups. So is it the startup culture that is not sustainable, or have we just started talking about it more? So what has changed that we see such a high rise in the number of mental health cases?
So it's a great question, and it is often discussed as this chicken or the egg point about the increase in mental illness. But I think the really important thing to say, first of all, is that it is happening. We are, as a society, as a planet, seeing a rise in mental illness, and we need to do something about it. But then what's also important, I think, about the last decade is that there has been an increasing amount of pressure for individuals to make their lifestyle changes to improve their mental well-being. And whilst that's important, it's not everything. And organizations do need to be held more responsible to support their employees. And I think this is especially true for tech startups that perhaps want to follow this model of Silicon Valley of way of working, where it's valuing overtime and it's valuing committing every second to your work life. Another point about this, I think, which is relevant for tech startups as well, is this idea of constantly needing to optimize yourself. Because of course, in the tech world, that is the aim, is to optimize the technology that you work on, the app or the website or whatever it may be. And whilst there are some approaches within psychology that promote that idea that we can be healthier, be happier, and optimize ourselves in that general direction, from a mindfulness perspective, there's a lot of red flags there, because what it does is that it ignores the fact that we are human beings, and as human beings, we make mistakes, and we also are not able to be perfect in this way. So this pursuit of perfectionism and to constantly strive to be the best in all aspects of our lives, I think that's another new phenomenon for today's people, for us, is that we're expected to be perfect at work, in our social life, in our mental life. And that is a huge amount of pressure, which is not achievable. And so for me, it's about setting more realistic expectations. And part of that is the expectation that people will make mistakes, and that's okay. But of course, being able to learn and to recover and to bounce back, and that ability to bounce back from mistakes, that's resilience. That is the most important thing for any organization to remember. And I think, of course, for startups in general, where there are constant changes and there is such fast growth, the likelihood of many mistakes happening is extremely likely. So it's really essential to find ways to build that resilience in your workforce, with your colleagues, as much as possible. But then coming back to this idea about mental health in itself, and is it just whether we're talking about it more, or are we seeing more cases of mental illness? I think we are talking about it more, which is very helpful for tackling the stigma associated with mental illness and mental health. So people are more open to seeking help, which is a good thing. And so that might in itself lead to more diagnoses being made, and also more diagnoses are being made because we're having a better understanding about mental health. So it's true in the sense that people are getting diagnosed more often, but that's essential in order for those people to be put on the right pathway towards recovery. And whilst it's not necessarily the best model, and there are some criticisms with diagnosis and the manuals that we have, so the ICD-11 or the DSM, for instance, it's all we've got right now and we need to work with this. And it can be very, very helpful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that's quite common, especially in the speaker community, is the fear of missing out, or FOMO. And signing yourself up for a lot of engagements and travels over a short period of time can sure cause a lot of stress and anxiety. So can you give us some tips on mastering the opposite, or the joy of missing out, and managing anxiety?
Absolutely. So for me, whenever my clients mention or have this, have FOMO as it is, it often makes me think about or highlights the lack of boundary setting. So when it comes to the fear of missing out, what we're doing is we're prioritizing other people's wishes or opinions over our own. And so that what happens then is that we're more likely to agree to, say, an extra conference or an extra journey on top of our already really very busy schedule. And actually what we need in that moment is perhaps some time to rest and to recover, or perhaps spend time with some family or friends, for instance. So again, it's coming back to understanding yourself, understanding your stress, and also being able to know what are your needs, and whether having regular opportunities to reconnect with yourself, whether that's through movement or sports or something creative or whatever it might be, that is just as important to schedule into your diary as any work-related activity. Because again, this slightly not backward idea, but it might feel a bit strange at first, is that taking time out for yourself to reboot your energy resources will make you much more effective when you go back into those work-related situations, especially public speaking, which is a performance. And so in order to be at your best, you need to be feeling as good as possible. So trying to balance those commitments, and to do that, just to be very clear with what's enough, what are your limits, and perhaps, saying, I will only travel for 2 events a month. That's my limit. Or perhaps it's more or less, completely up to you, but to begin that conversation. And then when it comes to JOMO, so the joy of missing out, one thing that we do, especially with the mindfulness practice, is you start to reframe those activities or those opportunities to reconnect with yourself. Say it's a meditation, to reframe it as a luxury, as a retreat, as something that is a gift for yourself, because that's what it really is. It's a way for you to dampen, to calm the stress system, the parasympathetic system, and find some peace, which in our busy world, in our busy schedules, can be very difficult. And often we wait till a holiday, or we wait until the weekend, for instance, to find those moments. But actually, there are many little moments that we could use or connect with in our day, even if it's for 3 minutes or for one breath. It could be as small as that, to help regain some kind of sense of connection, and reframing those into a luxury, so that it's not missing out. It's actually something, a gift for yourself.
Right. Yeah, I think that can really help us savor the experiences that we have on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
You mentioned mindfulness, and I remember that you are also holding mindfulness trainings and coaching sessions. Can you share with us a bit more about what mindfulness is?
Yes. So mindfulness is, quite simply, paying purposeful attention to the present moment with an attitude of non-judgment, kindness, and curiosity. There's 2 components there. There's a form of attention training and a form of attitude training. And in mindfulness, you train these aspects often through a formal meditation practice. And in mindfulness, it's a secular practice. So it doesn't have religious connections, although mindfulness absolutely does come from Buddhism and from a lot of religious practices. But it's been translated into a language that is more accessible for, say, a Western audience. And what mindfulness aims to do in a way, although I struggle to use that word, because what it's aiming to do is switching our mode of mind. So normally we are stepping into, we're constantly working in what we call the doing mode of mind. So this is when we're thinking, we're planning, we're organizing, we're remembering, problem solving. That's our typical mode of mind. And we're stepping out of that and into what's called the being mode of mind. So this is a real connection to the senses. So sound, touch, smell, taste. And I always forget the fifth one.
Sight.
Thank you, sight, exactly. There's always one I forget. And we try to connect with those senses in a very direct way. So noticing our tendency for the mind to wander, so to perhaps judge or to label what those experiences are. And whenever we do notice that the mind has wandered, because it will, that's what minds like to do. They like to wander. You gently, with this kind, non-judgmental awareness, bring it back to whatever you're focusing the attention onto. So this could be the breath and the movements of the breath, or perhaps even the world around you, to have to really look around and to notice the trees or the birds or the cars, what is there, and simply allow those stimulus as much as possible to come into your awareness. So there's different ways of being able to practice mindfulness, and there are a couple of evidence-based approaches. And the first one is what I mentioned at the beginning, this mindfulness-based stress reduction course, which was developed by John Kabat-Zinn. So this was the launch of mindfulness into the modern Western world, and has been shown to not only support people with the reduction of stress-related symptoms, but even physical health problems as well. And then over time, we've got some other approaches, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So if you're looking to really dive deep into a mindfulness practice, then the recommendation is always to start with an evidence-based approach, which is typically 8 weeks long. And you will go to a group session once a week that lasts for 2.5 hours. And then you're invited to practice, to learn a meditation each week that you do every day. So that's one approach. But there's other ways to fit it into your schedule now. So some places, myself included, offer weekend courses, or even if you want to occasionally drop into a meditation experience, and drop-in sessions are available. And of course, there are some apps available as well if you want to begin that process of learning about mindfulness.
Cool. And we just started 2020, and with the new year comes the social expectations of making new resolutions, setting goals, and putting immense pressure on ourselves to follow through with this. So let's make no resolutions this year, and rather make a promise to ourselves. As Rosie said, a promise to take care of our mental health and of those around us. A few moments of mindfulness a day can make all the difference. All right, before we wrap up, did we miss anything? Any piece of advice that you'd like our listeners to be mindful of?
I think exactly what you just said, Tanay, to be mindful that, especially at the beginning of the new year, people around us are going to be wanting to optimize themselves and to best themselves, which may be helpful for them, but there may also be unhelpful options. But to listen to yourself, you are the expert in your experience, and to trust that you can be able to make those wise choices and to listen to that.
Right, that's something to definitely keep in mind and introspect upon. Thanks for joining us today, Rosie.
Thank you so much.
This has been amazing. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Technically True. I'm @Tane1337 on Twitter, and I would love to know what you'd like to listen in the next episode. Until then, take care. You have been listening to Technically True, a podcast about public speaking, developer relations, and technology, hosted and produced by Tane Pant.